He simply must wait. But he asks about my staff, Mr. Speaker. He asks about my staff and what my staff are doing and what they have told me. And I can tell him, Mr. Speaker, that they have taken decisions throughout this pandemic that he has opposed to open up in July, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, to mount the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, and Mr. Speaker, to double the speed of the booster rollout, with the result that we have the most open economy in Europe, Mr. Speaker, and we have more people in employment and more employees on the payroll now than there were before the pandemic began. That is what my staff have been working on in Downing Street, Mr. Speaker, and I'm proud of them.
Keir Starmer.
So, Mr. Speaker, apparently Sue Gray is going to tell the Prime Minister, when he first became aware that his staff had concerns about the May 20th, the Prime Minister's account gets more extraordinary with each version of his defence. If the Prime Minister's new defence were true, it requires him to suggest that his staff are not being truthful when they say they warned him about the party. It requires the Prime Minister to expect us to believe that whilst every other person who was invited on the 20th of May to the party was told it was a social occasion, he alone was told it was a work meeting. It also requires the Prime Minister to ask us to accept that as he waded through the empty bottles and platters of sandwiches, he didn't realise it was a party. Does the Prime Minister realise how ridiculous that sounds?
Mr. Speaker, I've said what I've said about the events in Number 10. He will have to wait for the. He'll have to wait for the. And Mr. Speaker, I think he asks for further clarification. I think there are lots of people who are interested. I say this entirely in passing, Mr. Speaker. Lots of people are interested in the exact legal justification from the learned leader of the opposition for the picture of him drinking a pint of beer or a bottle of beer. Mr. Speaker, I merely perhaps he could tell the House about that in a minute, Mr. Speaker. But what I can tell the House is that throughout the pandemic, people across government have been working flat out to protect the British public with huge quantities of PPE, so we can now make 80% in this country, with the biggest and most generous furlough scheme virtually anywhere in the world, and the fastest. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, if we listened to them, we would have stayed in the European Medicines Agency, and we would never have been able to deliver the vaccine rollout at the speed that we did.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister thinks the only accusation he faces that he once had a beer with a takeaway, then Operation Save Big Dog is in deeper trouble than I thought. If a Prime Minister misleads Parliament, should they resign?
So, Mr. Speaker, let's be absolutely clear. The Right Honourable Gentleman is continuing to ask a series of questions which he knows will be fully addressed by the inquiry. He is wasting this House's time. He's wasting the people's time, Mr. Speaker. He continues to be completely irrelevant, Mr. Speaker, because we have an inquiry. We have an inquiry, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not going to anticipate that inquiry any further. What I can tell him is that it is because of the judgments that were taken in Downing Street and because of the willingness of the British people to put trust, by the way, Mr. Speaker, in those judgments, to come forward in huge numbers to get vaccinated, which people did, and I thank them for it from the bottom of my heart. People did that because they listened to our messages, Mr. Speaker, and it was a result of that that we now have the fastest growing economy in the G7.